Now, to discuss that further, we're joined by Harley Schlanger, spokesman of the International Schiller Institute, who is joining us from Germany. And also we have Don DeBar, activist and commentator, who is joining us from Russia. And let's begin with our guest from Russia, who can give us more information about exactly what is happening on the ground and also about the three other contenders and if they do actually pose a threat to Putin or not. Please.
Yeah, first the polling data shows that the president is very popular. This has been true for a number of years, where he's been polling favorably from anywhere from 60 to 75 and even higher percent. One of the things about a democratic process and elections is that if you want to maintain power, it is possible to maintain power forever. All you have to do is an incredibly good job that makes people happy. And that, I think, is a part of a big part of the factor here, that people remember how things were in this country after the Yeltsin years, when President Putin first came to power in 1998, 1999, and they see how things are today. And as a visitor, the changes are not just evident, but obvious. And certainly for those who live here, who experience the change in their condition from then until now, this is a major factor.
Thank you very much. Now let's bring in our guest from Germany. Sir, if you could please tell us more. We've heard about a number of explosions that have happened in Russia. What is your take on this? Why would these attacks happen in the first place?
Well, first I want to say that I agree with what Don said about Putin's popularity. In the Western media, they say that Putin will win the election because of suppression, of killing off his opponents and controlled press. It sounds like actually they're talking about what's going on in the West. Now, the explosions, the attack in the Belgorod district, attacks across the border from Ukraine, this is part of an ongoing NATO strategy to try to disrupt business as usual in Russia. Sanctions, arms, discussion of long-range missiles that can hit Russia, all of this is designed to destabilize Russia. The problem is it's based on delusions in the West. The delusion that Russia is a weak country, that Putin has no intention other than war. And in fact, the improved economy in Russia and the success in Ukraine, in spite of all the obstacles, has made him more popular. So I think we can expect, as Ukraine is moving to a situation of desperation, there may be more of these kinds of attacks, but I don't think it's going to change the situation. The West has Ukraine fatigue. It's interesting, if you think about Putin at 60 or 70% popularity, there's not a single leader of a Western country who at this point is even at 30 or 35%. In Germany, the chancellor is at about 12%.
That is actually an interesting point you just raised, and our guest from Russia seems to agree. He keeps nodding. So, Mr. Dondabar, if you could please elaborate more on that, as we have about 2 to 3 minutes before we say goodbye to our viewers. So, tell us more about Putin's popularity, and it will be his 5th term in office. What could that mean for Putin himself? He has definitely evolved into a better leader.
Well, he's older, certainly, and he's had more experience, and also the whole world has. I mean, we're entering a new phase in human development globally, and in terms of our institutions, is sort of a changing of the guard taking place from the American era, to the extent that that existed, to what comes next, which is, I think, apparently a more multipolar and a more fair distribution of sort of the management of the global theme. Just very briefly, it should be noted that the procedural aspects of this election, to me, as someone who's been involved for many years, I've run for office 5 times myself, is identical if there were going to be any difference, I would say that perhaps the places where the polling takes place are a little more friendly and user, inviting. Um, you walk in, you walk up to the desk, they check your ID to make sure you're an eligible voter. They look against the rolls, they hand you a ballot. You walk into a small private area to fill out the ballot. You bring it out and insert it into the top of a scanning device machine, which scans it, logs the vote, drops the ballot into the bottom of the machine for preservation in case you need to verify that the electronic vote is right. You have this period. That's how it's done. The real difference is between who's on the ballot and how they got there. And if you look at what's been happening in the United States with the attacks on keeping the two of the most popular candidates off the ballot, Donald Trump by every device, no matter what you think of him, 40 some odd percent of the American voters want him as president. And Robert Kennedy, who had more than 30 already like that, at the end of the day, watching who's going to be on the ballot and who's not will tell you who has a Democratic presidential election and who does not.
Okay, so Mr. Shangler, your final remarks. What would the world look like with another 6 years of Putin in office?
Well, Putin laid out the agenda recently at the Valdai Club when he said, we're going to move to a new, fair, just world economic system, breaking the control of the petrodollar system of the United States, the idea of the unipolar order, and giving the global South not just a bigger voice, but the means by which they can develop their economies in a fair way. And so I think Putin's election is important for the world, also in terms of the situation in the Middle East. After the war in Gaza is ended, we're going to see a reconstruction program, and it will probably be Russia and China playing a leading role in that, while the United States runs away with its tail between its legs.
Thank you very much. Quite interesting. Mr. Harley Shangler, spokesman of the International Schiller Institute, joining us live from Germany. Thank you very much, sir. And also we had with us on this edition of the Newsroom Don DeBar, activist and commentator, joining us from Russia. Thanks to both of you gentlemen for sharing your thoughts and views on this edition of the News Review. And that brings us to the end of this edition of the News Review, but moving on with the rest of the news of this hour. Palestinians